Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
You have a wonderful idea to change the world. You've dreamed about what success looks like, but what now? What do you do first? How do you take it from idea to reality? Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Rachel Anderson.
And I'm Katrina Purcell.
And today we're talking about those early ideas of making your dream a reality. This is such a great place to start for anybody who really isn't sure what to do. Maybe you're on the precipice of trying to start that company, but you really don't know how to get started. So Katrina, how do I know, first of all, if I even have a good idea?
It's a great question because I think we're all inherently, we think all of our ideas are good, right? And so we talk to our friends, we talk to people we know, they all say your idea is great because they want to support you. And so this, I think, is where you really have to start to expand your social circle. And you have to start going to other events, meeting people that you don't normally talk to, meeting people who come from different backgrounds or have different challenges, and really floating your idea. And I think some early stage folks are nervous about that because they think, what if someone steals my idea? And I think the first piece of advice that I provide there is that it's really about execution. It's not about the idea. And so if someone likes your idea enough to steal it and then try and make it a reality, it must be a really good idea and you should probably work quickly. But getting that feedback is so important. And so you can't keep your idea too close to the vest. You need to start to talk to people who would be prospective customers, people who would be prospective partners. Start floating the idea, getting some initial feedback, getting an understanding of, is a service or product something that they'd be willing to pay for? If they were willing to pay for it, how much would they pay for? What are key things that they would want the product or service to have? And this market research really will start to map out for you, not only the problem you're trying to solve, but it will begin to crystallize your pitch. And it will begin to crystallize the data that you need to be able to start to engage with potential investors or customers down the line once you actually build your product.
I think those are really good questions. I mean, you really want to get down to the heart of, does this idea have value beyond just the idea? And I think I, see this a lot, even working with businesses that are outside of the startup phase. They think about feature add-ons, or they think about launching into like this new space, and maybe it's adjacent to what you do. But when the rubber meets the road, they've invested time and energy, maybe even like product time, development time, right? They haven't done the pre-work to validate that there's enough monetary interest to make that product or feature worth it. And then you have the sunk cost fallacy, right? You've put so much time into something that you didn't validate. And now you keep investing more time and resources and energy in this when maybe there's just not enough market interest, or maybe it's slightly off what the market wants. So I think your questions are really good to focus down into, does someone actually want this? And would they pay for it? Because frankly, if they're not going to pay for it, you're not going to have a thriving business, right?
Exactly. And I think that's really the key, is a lot of people might want stuff, but are they willing to pay for it? And you're right. It's also very valid when you're doing feature development as well. Your customers might be clamoring for a feature, but are they actually willing to pay for that feature?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, let's say that they have done a lot of that work. They've talked to potential customers, they've validated their idea, they've seen that there's like a price out there that could work. What do they do first? What's the thing next if they want to make this into reality?
This one is a sticking point for some of the folks that I advise. And I think that your first inclination is, I'm going to build a deck and I'm going to go get investors. And that couldn't be, in my opinion, farther from what you should be doing. And so there's really, if you're building a product, you need to actually get a prototype together. whether it's a physical product, a software product, you need to actually cobble together something to show that your idea is functional. It requires investment. But if you don't believe in your idea enough to put your own money behind it, it's going to be very difficult to ask other people to put their money behind it. And their money is going to become a lot more expensive because there's a lot more risk involved if the product itself doesn't exist yet. And it doesn't need to be the beautiful end goal product. It needs to be a prototype. It needs to be, a minimally loved product. It needs to be something that has the whiz bang features that people want. Maybe the infrastructure is not scalable. Maybe the way that you're doing the data isn't the best, but it needs to show how things would go from point A to point B, how someone would interact with the product, so that you can prove out your idea. Because then you're going to get some groups together, some beta testers, have them look at it, have them give you feedback, iterate on it. And those steps are so important prior to going out and asking other people for money.
Yeah, this is so good. So you have made me think of this really. Okay, so welcome to the life of Rachel. The internet algorithm has keyed in on something recently that I like to watch, which is these like tiny clips about the Dragon's Den, which is essentially the UK version of Shark Tank. And so you have these like really little like snippets. And one thing I noticed recently is that the fastest way for them to deny giving any funding is that you haven't proven your product. You don't actually have enough viability in that idea, and they don't want to take a risk on you. And so, when I was working in the startup world, we talked a lot about the MVP, the minimally viable product. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I want to say, because I think it's really important, that this doesn't always have to be a full-time gig for you. If this is your dream and what you want at this point, you can find a way to figure out what's the least version that I can produce that shows me that there are people interested. There's a price that I have that people will pay for. There's a valid business here. What is that MVP? What's the least value? And you can still have another job while doing that. Yes, big risk. It's going to be hard. Your life is going to be impacted by that because all your time is going to be split. But I think sometimes these early idea people that maybe haven't done this before think it has to be one or the other. And I just want to raise that as not necessarily true, although it is helpful to fully be in that.
Agreed. And while it's helpful, it's not required. And I think you're the person who's going to make the biggest investment in yourself and in your ideas. You believe the most in yourself because you control what you're going to accomplish. And so taking that risk on yourself is definitely something that then helps others take a risk on you farther down the line. Once you've proven out that, number one, you have the stamina to keep up with it, maybe while you're also working full time or you're doing some freelance jobs or something to help pay the bills. But it's just so important to be able to show that it's not just an idea, because as we said before, an idea is not really worth much. It's the execution of the idea. It's the implementation of the idea that is really worth something.
That is so well said. I'm going to underscore that. So now I have an idea and I've talked to people. I have my MVP, my minimally viable product. I've been working on it. I think that there's something here. I want to pitch it. So how do I actually fund this idea, this product I've started?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to fund that I think folks are not always aware. So you can bootstrap it. Mm-hmm. You can do it on your own. You can figure it out. You can take a bonus from your full-time job. You can use a small business loan. You can use your credit card. There's all these different ways that you can bootstrap. But then you can go to friends and family. So these people are people in your network. They're people who you might know or who might be second, third contacts that either invest in companies like yours or are looking for other avenues to invest in or really believe in your product and your mission. They could be your early customers. You have to get a little creative in these pre-seed rounds. And so, seed rounds are generally larger rounds that are seeding the company for the future. A pre-seed round is sort of, I haven't quite proven out everything yet, and I want people who really believe in me, who really believe in my product, to take a bit of a risk. In some cases, they are taking that risk at a higher rate of return because if you're successful, they want to be able to really make that back. The other options then become an actual seed round, which generally for that, you might look to institutional. So you might think an angel fund, a VC fund, someone who has more capital and would be able to do continual injections of capital as you grow, if that's what you're looking to do. We've talked about this on some of our other episodes, but the most important thing is thinking through what you as a founder want as an exit strategy. So are you thinking that this is going to be a sustained long-term investment where in the end goal is to go public many years from now? Is the goal that you would be acquired by a strategic investor, but you need a certain level of investment before then? So really understanding what kind of capital you need. Do you need capital that's going to be patient and willing to work with you as you grow? Do you need capital that's going to be a larger infusion, but perhaps less patient and a bit more pushy about the decisions that you make?
Yeah, I think that that's really smart and so important, especially, it's really talked about so much from a funding perspective using investors, but really in the world of businesses and companies and like in the magnitude of what there is a very, very small percentage of businesses that actually have investors and successfully have investors as a strategy to grow. And so I think it's really important, exactly what you just said, to know your exit strategy, because that can really determine for you what path you take in order to get there. And then also to make sure that the other avenues with which you can fund your company are considered, because it does not guarantee you a strategy with investors. You are not guaranteed that path either. And if that's where you're banking, pun not intended, but if that's where you're banking that your money is going to come from, you could be really disappointed. And that doesn't necessarily reflect on the viability of your idea, of your product, of your service, of your ultimate company.
There are also, one thing that I forgot to mention, grants and other ways of alternative funding. So depending on your idea, depending on where you went to school even. So there are some universities that have small business departments that invest in their alumni. So, sometimes it just takes a little creative out of the box thinking of, new ways that you might be able to get. Those are generally not millions of dollars. They're more like 5, 10, less than $50,000. But depending on what your projections look like and how much you might need to really get things solidified, that might be enough to get you running.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. I'm glad you added that in there. So this, has been such a good conversation. I'm just going to plug, this is Katrina's bread and butter. She's so great at this. So if you want to talk to her or me more about this idea, you should definitely talk to us in the comments of this video. You should post in, the podcast, wherever you're listening, on our Instagram, or just contact us directly. Thank you so much, Katrina. This was, again, great. And we'll see or hear everyone next time.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.